Author of Hidden History, Crimes and Cover-Ups in American Politics, 1776 to 1963, and Survival of the Richest, Donald Jeffries separates the real from the unreal. Fact from fiction. Fact from fiction. Reverse engineering our manufactured reality. And now, from just outside the swamp-infested Washington, D.C., this is I Protest with Donald Jeffries.
And welcome to I Protest. This is Donald Jeffries, coming to you from just outside the swamp-infested Washington, D.C., as the man says, we do every Friday from 5 to 7 p.m. Eastern. A very special show today. I'm really honored and flattered and excited about having Sibel Edmonds with us. She's a noted whistleblower. She goes back, she wrote Classified Woman, a memoir after her work with the FBI. It involves, right around 9/11 and everything. And then she formed the National Security Whistleblowers Association. Now she's doing work on hospice corruption. So just a wonderful guest, and I'm honored to have her. Sibel, thanks for coming on the show.
Hi, Don. Thank you for inviting me. As I have told you before, this is my first interview in 5 years, and therefore it's special. It's exciting. Thank you.
Wow, it's special for me, and I'm honored that you chose me or you agreed to come on my show. So this is again, I always ask guests, and with you, we talked a little bit before the show, and you were in my neck of the woods for a while in Northern Virginia. You went to college right around the corner from me. George Mason is right around the corner from me. Um, how did you before? And I know you lived in Iran. We have that kind of connection there, and you were you predisposed to be kind of an independent thinker? I always ask guests, I've always been awake. From the time I was a teenager in the mid 1970s, I was working with Mark Lanes as a volunteer for the Citizens Committee of Inquiry to the JFK assassination. So I was always a radical. I didn't have an epiphany at some point, but a lot of people do. A lot of people are, normies or whatever, and then something happens to cause him to wake up, and then they end up in my world. Was that for you? Did you start out as kind of a patriotic person, and then you had your eyes open, and were you shocked at what you discovered?
I would say very, very early on, I was raised by my father, and he was a radical. He was a revolutionary person. He was a critical thinker. He was independent. He was a very brave, special person. He was a surgeon. He was a doctor, and he took his Hippocratic oath very, very seriously. He implemented, every day of his life that he worked as a doctor, as a surgeon. He served war fronts as volunteers with a group, organized group of doctors from that part of the world. Not Doctors Without Borders, as we know, they have been hijacked by other special interests.
Hmm.
But this was a small group of doctors. In fact, I took part in some demonstrations in Iran in 1979. My father also taught in universities, and he and his students participated in that very infamous Black Friday protest in Iran. And as a 9-year-old, my dad took me there. We lived in Iran for 5 years. That was not our nationality. We were Turkish. We are originally from Turkey. I also lived in Turkey for about 8 years of my childhood. I finished high school in Turkey. I finished elementary school in Iran, Tehran, and we also lived in Baku, Azerbaijan. My father's origin, Azerbaijan, was part of the Soviet bloc, and this would be during the communism for about 2.5 years, and that gave the base for my Azerbaijani language, which is the Turkic dialect. So just like Dari in Afghanistan, the language in Afghanistan, and Farsi, they are about 75%, maybe 80% the same language with minor differences. Same thing with many of these Turkic former Soviet blocs. they speak different versions of Turkish. So that's just a quick background. But yes, my father was tortured during Shah's regime as a doctor, as a surgeon. They pulled four of his toenails during interrogation, and at the time I was about 5.5, 6. And then my father was threatened by the horrible Islamic regime that later came into the picture, because you and I were talking about this briefly before we started, while we were doing the sound test, about the really inaccurate version of the events in Iran with the current Islamic government there. That suddenly this is the version almost 99% of Americans think of or believe in when you say, oh, what happened in Iran? They say, yes, Islamists came and took over. That's not accurate. There were many, factions in Iran who wanted to have democratically elected government. And some of them were socialists, some of them were communists, some of them called themselves parliamentarians in terms of their belief system. And yes, there was a pretty decent sized faction who were traditionalist Islamists. Then you had nationalists. So what happened was, with Shah's regime, which was horrible, the reign of Shah Reza Pahlavi, you had all these dissatisfied, discontent factions who just wanted to have no monarchy there, as they did in 1950s, as I'm sure you know, Mossadegh, and they just wanted to overthrow Shah monarchy.
Yeah.
So they put their differences aside, and they got together and they said, you know what, for now, let's forget about communism or socialism or parliamentarianism or Islamism. Let's just get rid of Shah, and then we can have a multifaceted government with representation for each faction. So this was the reason the whole revolution started. And of course, what happened later was the Islamic faction, which was stronger, they kind of got to some of the nationalists and even some of the socialists and said, you know, we need to get rid of the communists because they are pro-Soviet, etc. So they got rid of the communists. And then the Islamic faction with the nationalists, they said, well, now let's get rid of the socialists. So then they got rid of the socialists, and some fled, some got killed, some got imprisoned. And then finally, we had this government that you see today, the extreme Islamic government in Iran. So yeah, it didn't happen overnight. It was not a revolution that was implemented, done, carried by some Islamic extremists. It's more complicated than that. And actually, at the beginning, it was a very promising premise of taking this installed government. I say installed because in 1957-58, Iranians had done the same thing. They got rid of, they didn't want monarchy. They wanted to have the elected representatives. They elected Mossadegh, and they wanted to nationalize their resources, which was the main resource being oil. And the powers at the time, post-war powers, specifically, mostly United States and also the United Kingdom, the British government, they didn't like it, you know. So what they did was they came and they had their own coup that they implemented. This is the Americans and the Brits, and they brought Shah. His father was a king, then he had fled the country. They installed him, they imprisoned the democratically elected president, Mossadegh, and there we had the monarchy. So it was the installed monarchy by the West for several decades. And then when the Iranians, they outed the monarchy and they wanted to oust the monarchy, it was again looked at and criticized here as something barbaric and terrible, even though all they were trying to achieve was democratically elected government. They wanted to have a representative government. Well, that didn't happen at the end, but that's the story of Iran. And my father was taken to the front lines in the war between Iraq and Iran, and then we had to flee the country. We had to leave our house, our car, our bank accounts, our photo albums, family photo albums, and pretend that we were going to Turkey, our home country, to see our family, my grandparents, etc. And we were searched. We were stripped naked in the airport to make sure that we were not taking any currency. They didn't want, especially, they didn't want to lose more doctors. They already had lost so many physicians. They had fled to countries like the U.S. and England, etc. And so we came back to Turkey, and I went to middle school and high school there. And then I came to the United States in 1988 for university. I came to the United States to go to college. Then I fell in love with my husband, and I was married. And I remained married for 32 years, and I remained here. But going back to your question, critical thinking, I have been through a coup in Turkey because in 1981 there was another coup, and this time it was in Turkey. This coup was implemented by the United States and the NATO, and they brought a military regime to Turkey, and we had curfews all the way till like 1984. So we were there when the coup happened, and as I said, I lived under communist regime in Azerbaijan. And then, of course, in the past 38 years, I have been here in the United States. So you can say that I've been through it all in terms of different forms of governments. I have been through wars. I have been through coups, and with a role model who always was true to himself. He was a humanitarian person, my father, and as not just by words, but also by action, who taught me to be an independent thinker and also stand for what I believed and stand for the justice, for kinds of things that nowadays, and it's not only here in the United States, in many places in the world, is unfortunately being considered cliche, like naivete, when you believe in ideals being freedom, justice, humanitarian way of thinking. It's anyhow, I'm gonna go ahead and stop right here and let you ask me a question, Don, otherwise I go
Okay.
on forever.
No, well, you're great, but and so I'm wondering, considering your worldwide experience, you were a very worldly young woman when you came here. Were you expect, and then you end up working for the FBI, and I'm assuming maybe at that point you expected more from the United States. So did you think you wouldn't see the kind of corruption that maybe you saw in other places in the United States? Because that's what happened when you went to the FBI, right?
Yes, and I need to kind of qualify that a little bit because I really,
Hmm.
I never planned, I never wanted to work for government here, and that was not because I didn't look, positively or negatively. It was never in my plans. I used to be one of those very type A personalities, multiple lists, setting up objectives and goals and put deadlines and then go about check marking them. And when I look back as someone who has lived over half a century, I'm 55 now, like how foolish, we come to this, I don't know, stage of life, which I think in so many ways is such a beautiful stage. And you look back and you say, how foolish is that? Like making these long term plans and making lists and not really accounting for life happening because life happens. And so during those early 20s, I was very goal oriented. And when I came here, yes, I had I grew up, okay, being very critical of the United States of America in terms of foreign policy because I had never lived in the United States because I was one of the billions of people who were recipients of the British Empire and all the leftover and even the current influence of the British government, and also the United States of America and NATO. And I was very familiar with. Intimately familiar with the hypocrisy of U.S. foreign policy practices. I was when I was 13, 14, I was obsessed with, for example, Vietnam War. Okay, and interestingly, we have my husband and I. We ended up having one child. My daughter is from Vietnam because I lived in Vietnam for 2 years, from 2006 to 2008. But my obsession with Vietnam and Vietnam War, again, it was studying the United States foreign policy and of course Iran-Iraq war, installing regimes, implementing coups. So as an outsider, when you're in the recipient countries, as if you go right now to any countries over there, and not in the Middle East only, even if you go to Greece, because I have so many friends in Greece, and my mother's mother's heritage, they're all from Thessaloniki, they're from Greece, and they would be very critical, rightfully so, because we have done some horrible things around the world. If we start adding up of the numbers of people that we have killed through our wars, the United States, and I'm saying we, I'm a citizen. I have been here for 38 years.
We're
This
number
is my
one, Sibel. We're number one in that category.
that's right. We are number one. In fact, I don't know if you were to combine the modern last century's atrocities. I mean, we don't have any competitors out there, and it's interesting because even during 2006, 2008, when I was in Vietnam, I would meet some American visitors, and they would whisper and say, you know, right now they really don't like anywhere in the world us Americans. So everywhere we go, we say we are from Canada to be safe. And I just give you another interesting perspective from Vietnam because this is 2007, 2008. And I said, you don't have all these TSA in your airports, in this world of post 911, 9/11, and none of these, you have to bend over, take off your shoes, and get pat downs, and all those things, and all these measures, and this very wise, but he spoke it in a very simplistic way. This young man, 23, he was a university student. He looked at me quizzically and he said, but we haven't done anything bad to anyone. Why would anybody want to come and blow us up? Or why would it was that kind of, I don't know, it
Yeah.
should sink, and with me, it sank because I understood where he was coming from. So then I came to the United States and I loved it because then I saw at least, I would say, as a outwardly, when you come and you live, you're a student, and you eat, and you go to libraries and you buy books, right? I wrote this essay in high school, and this was for essay competition, in between, between high schools, and the principal said, we're not going to send it because if we send it, you will be arrested, you will be jailed, your parents will be arrested, because in my essay I was talking about journalistic freedom and freedom of speech, and at the time we had thousands of amazing journalists in jails, under torture in Turkey. Okay. So here I could write anything I wanted to write. I could go and get any book I wanted to get. So those things were extremely attractive to me and magnificent to me. And so I kind of basked in it for a while. And because I didn't tread within anything governmental, still knowing that, yes, our foreign policy has been atrocious, really atrocious, there were great things here, okay? I have been to 44 states in the United States. And then I was in business, like I worked with my husband. We operated a business. So everything that I came in touch with at its face value was like really good. And my work with the FBI, how did it come about?
Mhm.
Um, I worked between 1994 and 1998. I was very active with orphanages around the world. This was a passion of mine since the age 16. I had worked with orphanages in Russia. We went to Russia in 1992 and lived there for a year in St. Petersburg and worked with an orphanage there. I had worked with orphanages in Turkey and later in 2000s in Vietnam. Um, so in Alexandria, I know we were neighbors practically.
Mhm.
I became certified and court appointed special advocate, specialized in sexually abused children and all the system we have here, the foster care, etc. So during those 4 years, I represented about maybe 11, 12, a dozen of really excruciating cases involving horrible child sexual abuse cases and the foster care, etc. And I became very interested in crime against children. Okay. And as I was, because I got 2 degrees from George Washington University. One was psychology, specialized in criminal psychology. The other one was criminal justice, the BA that I got with a minor in forensic science. So I was really interested in FBI's unit specialized in crime against children. And this would be around 1998. So I had applied for a summer internship position and I never heard back. And life went on. And then 9/11 happened. And again, in my book, Classified Woman, there's more details there. And all of a sudden, I received a call from the FBI. This is 3 days after September 11 in 2001. So this would be September 14th. And the unit chief for the FBI Washington's field office said they were desperately in need of my skills, and this was my opportunity to serve my country because I had skills that was extremely in demand because I spoke three, four of the languages, fluent in three, four languages that FBI had a lot of cases, files on Farsi, Turkish, Azerbaijani, and Dari, which is Afghanistan. And I was in the midst of getting my master's degree. I was working with my husband full time. I said, well, I don't have time. And they said, just join us as a contract. You tell us how many hours you can work, how much you can give us. We will take even 5 hours a week. That is how it came about. And with that top secret clearance, uh, and it was a quick proficiency test to verify that, yes, I am indeed like academically even fluent in these languages. So that was how I ended up with the FBI, right? 3, 4 days after 9/11 and the whole case.
Right, and so pretty much, so it's right after 9/11.
Mhm.
So how long did it take you for you to get into trouble there? Because it seems like it was pretty much right at the bat. You started seeing things that maybe they didn't want
Absolutely.
you to see. Yeah.
Yes, it pretty much started within the first couple of weeks. It was again the details. It ended up becoming a 300 plus 360 pages of a book. Not only what happened while I was within the FBI, and then what happened when I after after the FBI and with the United States justice system dealing with both the legislative branch and the judiciary branch and the courts. My case went all the way up to the Supreme Court, and I became known as the most classified person in the history of the United States because they issued these really draconian back then rarely used state secrets privilege as gag orders, meaning even if she's 100% right, she can't say a word about anything that she is trying to say. And they retroactively classified everything that congressional representatives, congressmen at the time, senators like Senators Chuck Grassley, Senator Patrick Leahy, these people had given interviews to the media, right? They had made public statements, they had released press releases. Uh, 3 years after all the stuff these congressional people, representatives, senators had done, the Justice Department came and said, now we are retroactively classifying everything you guys said, which is insane. Like 3 years after the fact, millions of people had heard those interviews. Tens of thousands of people had downloaded those documents. But the government said, now we consider those, every single one of those, classified. And then seeing that actually there was not really much protest. Now that's pretty becoming the name of your show, from the Congress.
Yes.
I mean, so I have a master's degree in public policy. So during those first 10 years in the United States, between 1988 and let's say 2000, I really bought in. I'm like, wow, this is a great system. It's the separation of powers, and here you have the legislative branch, nobody, and then we are also separated based on state and the federal governments,
Right.
and even a state within a state, the power of local governments. So when you look at it from the outside or as a regular
Looks
American
pretty good on
citizen,
paper, doesn't it?
oh
It
my
should, if it looks,
God,
it
it
looks great.
looks
Yeah.
magnificent. It looks
Mhm.
magnificent. Yay, us. I mean, I would eat 6 hot dogs on 4th of July just based on those alone.
Yeah, well, this, so I mean, so you got it. So you describe what you, and because this is, you have so much information. I hope you mentioned an hour, but if you want to stay for the whole show, that'd be great. 'Cause I think we
Let's
can
see.
fill up the
You'll
whole
be
show and then some.
spontaneous, Don,
Yeah,
and
let's
let's see
yeah,
how
let's.
much you can stomach.
Okay, well, no, well, we haven't even, we've really barely got into the story because we haven't got to, you're there at the FBI. So exactly what do you see? And what happens because they ended up, you ended up getting into hot water, and this is where you became a public person and eventually classified woman. What exactly did you see? What were you trying to warn them about? And just was just one thing or a whole bunch of things?
There were multiple things. Again, it would take hours to cover them, but if I put it in categories, number one, the most important one, and at the time, the number one reason they went about invoking the state secrets privilege had to do with September 11, 9/11 related cover-ups, and also players operate operators, global operators, right? I kept referring to as Operation Gladio B. So this was one category, and it was not only me. There were several senior agents, special agents within the FBI. There were several language specialists. So initially, when I went to Congress, when I went to the Inspector General's office, etc., it was not only me. I went there with documents and the list of witnesses. And some of these witnesses initially, they were summoned by the Congress, by, let's say, Senator Leahy and Grassley. They formed a joint task for, in my case. So it was bipartisan, it was one Democrat, one Republican, because of the severity of the issues. And this is right in the thick of post 9/11 9/11 world, like when it's like we are passing Patriot Act and Department of Homeland Security. It's like hail USA. And that was one category. The other one had to do, and this was uh, had to do with espionage, meaning the FBI was so severely penetrated. It was incredible. Some of them just due to nepotism and cronyism that you would expect, governments, bureaucracy, etc. But in some cases, it was interagency espionage besides the foreign penetration. And f- I mean, let me put it this way. The CIA wanted everything FBI had, okay? There and and since you have been covering, this is one of the reason you are my first show in 5 years is you've been around. You
Yeah.
started with JFK, correct?
Yeah.
Which
Yeah.
was in some people's opinion, and I tend to agree with that. It was a coup. That
Yes.
was the start of coup. And if you look at all the graphics, like you don't look at one chunk like this 3 years, what happened here. You look at it from that time period to now, it's then you get to see the forest, not only the trees. And then Kennedy's assassination is pretty much the start of it. Okay. So like people say, oh yeah, there was this act and that act, and especially after Watergate, and the CIA doesn't operate domestically, they operate internationally. Well, I can tell you 100% that is wrong. CIA continued and continues to operate domestically. And the whole thing is an absolute nonsense. And not only that, they actually have their people who actually get them information from the FBI to them that FBI wouldn't otherwise share with the CIA. So this was another category that became a reason for that extreme level of government classification and state secrets privilege, because the FBI had a bunch of people. Like one of them was Dennis Hastert. Now I can talk about it, right?
Oh, yeah. Very interesting.
So Dennis Hastert, it was the longest serving Speaker of the House in the United States. Okay. And since 1998, they had Dennis Hastert in videos, okay? Because this was under first FISA monitoring, but then it became a criminal investigation in the background. And certain influences, some of them foreign, would take boys, 13 years old boys, to Dennis Hastert's little quarter, which was above his office. He kept a little separate in this townhouse office. And I was listening to this conversation of people who were taking these underage boys as gifts, sometimes foreign gifts, but then some of these had to do with blackmail. So for blackmail reasons, they had so much on Dennis Hastert, right? Well, CIA didn't want to get this. They didn't want to get this out because of their own reasons, right? Or there will be some honest, real investigations by the FBI, and as soon as CIA would find out, they would go to the State Department, would say, you need to quash this investigation by the FBI because that ends up damaging our certain very important operation, right? So all of a sudden, they would shut down a very extremely important terror investigation, let's say related to 9/11, because if they continued, it was going to touch some CIA operations, etc. So these were the macro categories of types of things. And again, I had the details, I had the documents, I had the audio tapes, I had I had the other agents, that's how it started. And later, after all the gag orders, Dan Ellsberg became a very good friend of mine. Dan, and
Pentagon Papers, sure.
yes, and he was one of my good friends and supporters. And he would fly from San Francisco. He used to live in Berkeley. He passed away just a couple of years ago,
Yeah.
and he would stay with us in our townhouse, etc. So in his case back then, because time was different, he went to the New York Times and he gave the Pentagon Papers. With me, because I was still so naive, but also because the media was even that much worse since Dan Ellsberg's days, I had decided to do it methodically, per law, legally, meaning I went to the OPR's office within the FBI with all these documents. Then I went when they started coming after me, then I went to the Inspector General's office. Then I went to Congress, the specific committees that are tasked with oversight of the FBI, which in this case was Judiciary Committee and to a certain degree Intelligence Committee. I didn't go to the media to start with. So I didn't go out there and start blowing whistles saying, oh my goodness, looking, this is what FBI is doing, thinking along the way that as I was doing this, it was going to end what I was doing. They were going to take over. Initially, the Inspector General's office, then the Congress. Well, as you know, things don't work out that way here in this country.
Mhm.
It made its way. I was on CBS 60 Minutes, and it became a public case.
Well, yeah, it's well, yeah, that's amazing. You and Daniel Ellsberg was your friend, and I noticed when I was looking, reading up on you, Paul Newman wrote a blurb for your book. How did you know Paul Newman?
I got to meet him, know him because Paul Newman has a foundation called Newman Foundation that every year gave the world's top freedom of speech advocate. They call it the Paul Newman's Freedom of Speech Award, right?
Right.
And they selected me in 2006, I believe it was
Wow.
2006. So as part of it, I had to fly to New York. They had this big gala with 3,000 people coming, like all the Hollywood people, all the political figures. And of course, you are sat there at the table with Paul Newman, and he also was gracious to, on camera, actually make statements about the importance of the freedom of speech and this award's importance because of that. And that's how I got to meet and know him,
Well,
in not personally, but
very
through
cool.
that award.
I eat his salad dressing regularly, so I just so I love his salad dressings. So anyhow, so you're in the FBI. You're now getting to be now because of what you saw. Um, what? So how did this lead directly into you writing classified? Because I'm assuming what happened to you? Did they force you out? Did they try to blacklist you from getting work anywhere else, or what happened with that?
Again, Classified Woman has like two chapters on this. It first
Mm,
started with retaliation when I went to the FBI's own Office of Professional Responsibility, OPR. Let's say, think of it as a smaller scale Inspector General's office for FBI only. And the next level to go channel would be Department of Justice's own Inspector General's office. So the first reaction was basically shut up. No, actually, the first reaction
mhm,
was, we love you. We
mm,
want to have you join us not only as analyst, we want to send you for this expedited 3 months so you're an FBI agent, and we'll start you with GS 12 level. You usually start, I don't know, like GS 8 or GS 9. And, and so it was like, but just shut up. It's like the
mm,
SCFU. And
mhm,
and they saw that no, I was not motivated by any of those. I was not about to, I didn't want to have an FBI career. So those things didn't work. Then it became intimidation tactic. They sent several agents to our house, and they took my husband's computer. They took my computer, and they said I had leaked information. Well, I had not leaked any information, so they couldn't find anything in our computers. Then the next thing was they gave me this order to go and get a polygraph. A polygraph for what? Well, because you have top secret clearance. But I just took a polygraph, and I took this job only 7 months ago. What is the reason for the polygraph? We won't tell you. Well, I took the polygraph. I passed the polygraph. They wanted to set it up that I had leaked classified information, therefore I should be prosecuted. So that didn't work. Then what they did was basically they fired me, which was not exactly firing because I was not their employees. I had my own business. I had contract with them. So they ended the contract, and then they slapped me with all these classification and gag orders. Now, with Classified Woman, the book, even though I had written that, my manuscript, the draft, and had it finished by 2009, 2010, I had to submit it to the FBI for pre-pub review
yeah,
because
sure. Sure.
I had signed, and they had me signed hundreds of pages when I took the job with the FBI. You don't even look at it after a while. You
Same
just
thing in
put
the
your
yeah,
signature.
yeah. You have to. If you write anything, you have to go. It goes through channels. They have to,
If it's
approve it. Yeah.
if it's nonfiction, correct. So again, based on the law, FBI has 90 days, 90 business days to go through your manuscript with their black marker and then mark anything that they don't want you to write about. Well, FBI took a year and a half. They violated that part of the law. So I had to go and spend on attorneys, the attorneys sending letters. Where is it? Where is it? Finally, we got the manuscript back, Dawn, and you know what it was?
Hmm.
Every single thing, and the manuscript itself was 450 pages, was blacked out, including the title of the book, Classified Woman,
They redacted your book.
including, yeah, my name was redacted by Sibel D. Edmonds. So everything, I have it, it's in our box, everything redacted. And saying, no, not a word can be published. State secrets privilege covers everything about her because she herself is classified. So we had to battle that for a couple of years. And even though I had a, 6-figure book deal, it got canceled on me because the publishers in New York, back then there were 5, 6, probably today there's only one. They all consolidated.
Yes, yes, yes.
So they're like, no, 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 without the FBI giving its blessing, we're not going to take the chance with this. Then there was one other publisher. This is very interesting because we're going to get to the current politics and partisanship. They said, we will publish this, but as long as you take out chapter 18, 19, 20. I'm like, why? Well, because all these things were done to you during the Bush administration. And your chapter 18, 19, 20 is basically crap talking Obama, because listen, do you know that Obama is the first and only president in the United States of America who actually went as far as jailing whistleblowers, government whistleblowers?
Sure, sure.
Even Dan Ellsberg didn't go to jail. So, and I was one of
And the only one to ever kill an entire wedding party. He did that in Yemen. It was pretty amazing.
absolutely. So, but you know what
Mm,
happens,
mm,
right? Is the psychology of, human, all of us. It was so horrible with Bush administration and everything they did to me, John Ashcroft, all that,
yes, yes.
horrific stuff. We were all asking for a savior, right? And I was one of millions who said, anyone but this people, Bush family, right? Nobody can be as bad as this guy. It's impossible, right? So then you get a guy who's amazing marketing, is selling this great change and all these things.
Mhm.
And we said, oh, yeah, well, let's replace this one because nobody can be worse. Well, guess what? We expanded our wars. We ended up with actually Hillary Clinton and him. So, yes, it did get worse. But then the publishing houses being on the left, they're like, why are you mixing Obama into this? Like, well, because
Right,
he's
right.
horrible. And because this book is the book of truth, right? Nonfiction. So that was another reason that I decided to have my own team of editors,
Right.
line editors, etc., and publish it myself because I didn't want to compromise on what would be in this book and what shouldn't be. And at the time, 99% of publishers, they didn't have the guts to publish a book, which
Yes.
basically going full circle. I left a country that didn't let me publish my essay. And I had written about freedom of speech, and I ended up coming here saying, whoa, this is fantastic. And guess what? My first book gets to be 100% banned and classified.
Yeah,
And I had to
yeah,
dare to publish. It's some kind of an interesting karma.
yes. Yeah, we don't exactly live up to our credo, but the rest of the world hates us for our freedom, though, Sibel. That's the problem. We have to
Oh,
remember that.
absolutely.
They just hate
That's
this
right.
freedom of ours, isn't it? But so, how when you see yourself when you got in this position, obviously, and you ended up forming the National Security Whistleblowers Coalition,
Yes.
and which is wonderful. How did you? Because it wasn't long after that, I guess. I'm trying to remember the timeline of whether it was Bradley, then Bradley Manning first, or Assange and Edward Snowden. You
They all
started
came
seeing,
after us after
yeah, they okay,
2008.
okay.
Yeah.
So when you saw that, did you see a lot of yourself? At least you didn't. weren't treated quite as badly. Is that because the one thing Obama did do that I credit him for, he did commute Bradley Manning's ridiculous sentence. It was sentenced like
Yes.
an incredible amount of time. So he did do that. But obviously Snowden and Assange still in exile. Are you thankful that that didn't happen to you? Did you think that possibly could have? Did you see kindred spirits in these guys?
Some of them, yes. Manning, yes. Assange, to a large degree, yes. I have my own reservations on Edward Snowden. Not the people who are saying, "Oh, he was a traitor." No, not in that
Mhm.
front. But I had 154 national security whistleblower members for our organization. People including Anthony Schaefer, Lieutenant Colonel. I had several colonel. So I got to, before accepting any of these members, I went through every single thing about these individuals. For example, for our organization, we didn't take in people who they said they blew the whistle, but the purpose was personal thing, like, oh, they didn't promote me, so I'm going to get revenge and I'm going to go and tell them what you did, kind of a thing. So
Mhm.
the really honorable people in this organization, and based on that experience, and also at the time I was, when Edward Snowden whole deal came true, I was in touch with Ray McGovern. You're familiar with Ray
Yes,
McGovern
yes,
and
yes.
Dan Ellsberg. Um, and I actually personally sent questions to Edward Snowden that had to do with some of these questions, and he absolutely refused to answer, which
Hmm.
I have never had with by any whistleblowers ever.
Interesting,
And
interesting.
because of that, I would say, I don't know. I mean, to say I don't know, I'm not sure how real it is, because there are some elements that are absolutely flag raising, but not concrete enough for me to come and make a claim and say, I just don't know. Maybe not.
Yeah, well, well, I don't think any of them have to worry about being pardoned because none of them are rappers or because Trump pardons rappers and people like that. So he doesn't seem to pardon anybody else. He has a thing for doing that. But um, what do you think? Because Glenn Greenwald kind of came into prominence through his work with Snowden. And he seems to have got. Am I I'm sure my audience. I have the most jaded audience. None of them have said you're a disinfo agent yet. So
Realistic,
good for
maybe.
you. Pretty much everybody is. Half of them think I am. I think. But as far, but they still listen to the show, so that's great. As far as Glenn Greenwald's doing, in fact, I found out about Substack through Glenn Greenwald, not directly, but I remember he was talking it up early on, and a lot of people found out about that. So thank goodness for that. I don't know if you're on Substack or not, but he was associated with Snowden. That's the only reason I know. So and
Well,
he seems to be doing good work now.
mm, um, I am, here's the thing. With me, you get straight talk, okay? I would say, again, you're you having gone through all this, stages of politics we've had, and being one of those in quote jaded ones, or some people would say realistic ones,
Mhm.
that's a better term for it, is uh, I asked this question, and once you answer it, probably you have answered it for me. How is it that this extremely nuclear information that Snowden has, right? And the
Mhm.
US government exiles Snowden, and he runs away, goes to Russia, all these things happening. Then you get a CIA operative businessman, Pierre Omidyar, right? He's
Mhm.
the guy who invented eBay, and he's the one who has the publication that bought Glenn Greenwald. Then you get like this businessman, billionaire, buying that information
Mhm.
and say, I'm going to set up a newspaper, like a media company, like Jeff Bezos has his own media company. Now he has Washington Post, right?
Yes. Yes.
When you look at the all, and you have Elon Musk who has X, right?
Mhm.
So it's a day when you have these, when I say billionaires and trillionaires, some of these people's net worth is bigger than some countries' GDP
Yeah.
combined. Okay,
Yeah. Yep.
so when you get these people setting up media organization, And then they are buying like the world's most classified information, but they are untouched. And they give a journalist tens of millions of dollars to do that. I just hold my nose. I don't know what you would do, but there are
Sure.
things that
Oh,
are
I understand.
considered
Sure.
journalistic integrity. So I am, anytime anyone sees anything like that, I would stay away because it, it, it's tainted.
Sure, you're right to question everything, and I'm glad you're doing most of the talking because I'm getting comments. I don't know if Tony can hear me, and you can hear me fine, can't you, Sibel?
So far, so good.
Yeah, because the audience keeps claiming your microphone is fine, but mine is really low. I turned my volume up
Hmm.
really loud. I don't know, so I don't know if it's everybody or not, but I've had several comments in there. So
No, it's
and
perfect. It's
then
crystal clear, this end.
okay, well, she hears me fine, so that's I don't so okay, audience. Hopefully you can hear me well enough, but I'm moving as close to the microphone as I can. It'll be like Mick Jagger here and have my mouth right on it every second, but I don't want to go that far. And yeah, Debbie Zapone says she can't hear me. Okay, yeah, most of them say it's lower, but I'm glad you're doing most of the talking. But so so after this, in terms of classified memoir, I noticed that you published it yourself, so you were kind of a pathfinder, and that's great that you were able to because it looks like it did pretty well. Did you do pretty well from that? And what was the
It
reception to the
became
book?
Amazon bestseller, and again, I'm thankful to all my supporters. I started this back then. We didn't have Facebook, Twitter, all those things. This is 2008, 2009. I had a tiny little site, a forum called Boiling Frogs Post, and because
Hmm.
boiling frogs is one
Yes,
of my most favorite analogy, and
sure, sure.
understand why it was called boiling frogs. And I think we have passed the stage of boiling. We are fried.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's boiled. I think it's completely obliterated at this point, Sibel.
Exactly, exactly. So that was again. I'm really thankful for their support. And we sold more than any publisher could have sold, without being in bookstores. Tens of thousands of copies, and uh, and and even though FBI had threatened to come and take me to court and put me in jail, they didn't. They didn't do anything. And this was a banned book. I called their bluff. They're there, and I published it. And then I ended up writing a fiction because I didn't have to submit a fiction to the FBI for pre-pub review called The Lone Gladio. So why they invoke the state secrets privilege in my case is completely documented in a fiction book I have that came after that. It's called The Lone Gladio. So that's a fiction that tells the truth. Let me put it that way without having to go through any pre-pub review.
Sure, exactly. Yeah, that's a lot of us. That's what I would like to do. I'm a novelist, but I've had much better success. I've only had one novel published, getting nonfiction published. But yeah, you can say a lot more in fiction, and I like that. To be able to do that, you got a lot more freedom. But so anyhow, so we let's get to because I'm fascinated by, and again, you can talk about this as much as you want, but I cover a lot of corruption, municipal corruption. We had lots and lots of people from Child Protective Services. You touched on foster care and stuff. We've talked about child sex trafficking, all the child sex scandals, which of course are really in the news now with the Epstein list. We can talk a little bit of that. Well, I'm sorry, the Epstein list that does exist. Free Ghislaine Maxwell. Are you with me on that? Because she's in prison for nothing out of there because nothing happened. But in terms of the hospice thing where I understand this came about because of a personal reason. So how did you come to be involved in that?
Well, the final public appearance I had was in 2001, April, May 2001, 2011, no, 2021. I'm sorry, 2021. So it's 4 years and 2 months ago. And this was just a solo video telling people that I was not gonna produce anything for a while because I had mentioned earlier, I was married to my husband for 31 years, and we had a pretty big age difference as well. I guess that's the only reason it was so amazing good, because throughout my life, all my friends, including Dan, my friends have always been, several decades older than me, because
Mm.
I tend to be able to connect at a social level as well, with people of different generation. Some of it due to my upbringing, my father, some of it due to my experiences, for all various reasons. My husband, we were living actually overseas in 2018 and 2000 through 2018 to 2020. We were in Greece and Turkey, and our daughter at the time was like 8, 9 years old when we left for those 3, 4 years. He was diagnosed, and it came out of nowhere. Diagnosed with ALS, um,
Oh, I'm sorry.
and then, with ALS, it's a neurodegenerative disease, and it's one of those extremely hard to diagnose diseases, because there is no particular test you can do, blood test, this and or scan and say you have ALS. You have to go through the process of elimination and say, well, it's not the Lyme disease, it's not the Parkinson, it's not a brain tumor. And so it takes a long time to even find out that it is ALS. And so he was diagnosed with ALS, and other than that ALS, he was like in perfect shape. No cholesterol. He was never on any kind of medication, which was unheard of for someone who was 70 years old. And perfect heart, perfect lungs. He had never smoked in his life. He didn't like to drink anything. Very active physically, all that. And then we ended up coming back to the United States right in the middle of COVID, because everything was shut down in Greece and in Turkey. We needed to get diagnosis. We didn't know at the time that this was ALS. So, in fact, we were evacuated. There were 45 of us Americans with a chartered flight arranged by the State Department. And we came directly to Miami, and first went to Holy Cross Hospital, did some tests, and they said it's going to take a long time. This is during COVID, right in the middle of COVID. Ordinarily, let's say certain blood tests would take whatever, 3 weeks to come back the results. It would take 4 or 5 months during COVID. So we ended up in Florida. That's how we ended up in Florida. We ended up settling in Naples, Florida, to go through all these diagnostic tests. And it took a year to find out that it was ALS, and it was one of those progressive ALS, one of the worst kind, where ALS hits your lower proximity and upper proximity, meaning your leg first, left. So he lost his left leg first, then it was half of his arm, right arm. Then he lost his speech, if I go through the progression. But as if you're familiar with it, your mind is intact. And my husband was 154 IQ. He got his degrees, all of them, PhD, before the age 21 in nuclear physics, in the United States. He very intelligent, extremely intelligent, and all of that remained intact. Your emotions are intact. It's just you're losing your body parts one by one, the movements in them.
Terrible,
So
terrible.
that's the summary of what the disease was. Now, if you have been following especially in the past 2, 3 years, for it to become back-to-back scandals, it's on hospice fraud, because hospice is currently around 36 to 40 billion dollars a year industry.
Yeah.
That's 2024 numbers being over 30 billion dollars. All of it paid basically by Medicare. And hospice was, people who are familiar with hospice started as this good organization to help people during their final stage of dying, comfort death. And they started, as many organizations start, with some noble missions, and they started like that, and they were that until things started changing in around 1990s in the United States. And these are the things I found out later after a lot of bad things happened. So lately, what you see with the news has to do with hospice fraud. And these are fraud at such scales, hundreds of millions of dollars for each one of these scandals and incidents, with Medicare's basically paying these checks. And also, so that's the scandals, and you can just put it in Google and just limit it for the past 2 years, put hospice fraud, and then you see how many scandals, how many of them have hit the news. Okay. Well, this is before we ended up with hospice, which we were not even looking for hospice. So fraud is a major deal with hospice. And then the other thing they have been engaged in, not all, but some, unfortunately too many hospices, has to do with abuse, neglect, and covert forced euthanasia. And it doesn't matter where you stand on euthanasia, because if somebody decides and they're mentally competent, whatever they decide, they decide. I'm not one of those people who's going to sit here and judge people. But when I'm specifically putting the emphasis on forced covert, that is part of what we went through. So when my husband was diagnosed, we were told that, towards, he was given 2 to 4 years life expectancy because of his good health before ALS.
Mhm.
Now, they said, okay, towards the end, you want to start, in addition, you won't be able to go to clinics, you want to have good palliative care. And palliative care, the some of the nursing care and everything towards the end of life things. And then eventually there would be hospice, right? Or if somebody is choosing a different method, they are choosing a different method. So we are in Naples, Florida, and there's only, this is towards the tail end of COVID. Um, there's this one hospice organization that was, they're spending millions of dollars. They're on every single TV news and the commercials and the YouTube and billboards, and they're advertising that in addition to hospice end of life, they also provide palliative service. So we contacted them. We said, we are interested to find out about your palliative care services, but not for now, for like, let's say 6 months, 9 months, 1 year down the road. And they sent these marketing material and these salespeople, and they came to our house and they said, oh, and this is when my husband was given, 2 to 4 years. You're looking at least 2, 3 years life expectancy. They said, well, because he has terminal illness, ALS, and now it's confirmed, and he is going to die, there is no cure for it. For these palliative services, we have to enroll you as a hospice patient, And look at it. I mean, I have a master's degree in public policy. I'm like, huh. But, he has, at least they're saying 2 years. They're like, yeah, but eventually it's there. It's like, well, eventually we all going to be dead. So we're going to get hospice services? What do you mean eventually? They said, well, that's how you get Medicare, because you have Medicare. We didn't know. So they enrolled my husband that day with their hospice. And we didn't even see or use them because my husband was driving. This was during the early stage, right? And for the first these 7, 8 months, they charged close to $30,000 without us knowing. We didn't know. They were telling Medicare that they were providing us daily home aid services, nursing, anyhow. So that's for the fraud part. And now I'm going to get to the reason I have been absent for so long is, as the end was, before the end, my husband got infection. is like bronchitis. And one of the most dangerous things to have when you have ALS is to end up with pneumonia. And I had studied ALS by this time. I was like a walking encyclopedia on ALS. So he has infection, and because of his swallowing and the effect of infection on his ALS, he was getting dehydrated. You know how it is. You have to give thickened water, etc. Some people are familiar with ALS. I don't want to get into too much detail. This was the first time we were really reaching out to this hospice that had been charging the government, Medicare, tens of thousands of dollars every day, right? For almost a year by now. Year. So these hospice, I'm like, it's an emergency. He has infection. This is happening. And they come and to our house and they say, no, we won't give IV because IV is considered curative and hospices are not allowed to give you IV. I'm like, no, he's dehydrated and IV is not going to cure his ALS. If IV cured ALS, nobody would have ALS, correct? And they would not give us antibiotics, so it wouldn't turn into antibiotics. It's without going into too much details, we went through 2-3 days of hell in our house. These people refusing giving anything. They will be leaving boxes of morphine, and he doesn't have pain. It's like, give him morphine and Ativan. So finally we called ambulance, a 911. We took him to hospital. In the emergency room, things were good. They took care of him. We told them that we initially, went through the hospice and this is what happened. We didn't want to have anything to do with these people. Something seemed really crooked, etc. And unbeknown to us, this hospice company that also has some partnership with this hospital, which we didn't know at the time, they called the hospital and they instructed them to withhold antibiotics and IV and put him in a hospice contract bed in the hospital and withhold everything per their instruction. Now, look, I'm a competent adult and my husband was mentally competent. We are asking for hospital services. Emergency ER doctor says he needs to be treated with antibiotics. He needs to be given IV and NIV oxygen until he recovers from his infection, respiratory infection. And as soon as he was taken to a room outside the ER in the hospital, they told us we couldn't be in the room with him. My daughter at the time was 12, and at night during the evening, and they would not give him any IV, any antibiotics. And they just, because this is going to be, my case ended up on CBS 60 Minutes. This, because it's about to, in the next few months, this is going to be a major public case that will come out because it has videos, it has documentation. My daughter and I, the next morning, because they wouldn't let us go to this room at night, we had to leave the hospital at 10 p.m. We went into the hospital room at 10:30, 11 a.m. and my husband was dead and rigor mortis had already set in. He had been dead for at least 8 hours. And nobody in the hospital had discovered because nobody had gone to his room per hospice company's instruction that he was hospice contract patient because of Medicare and money. And my husband, he was my biggest cheerleader during my whistleblowing and fighting the FBI. When we found his body, his index finger was on his cell phone on his chest. And this is a man who was 95% paralyzed. He didn't have 2 legs. He had half an arm, use of half of his one hand. He documented his death with videos over 4 hours in a hospital. This is the United States, and this is one of the richest cities in the country, Naples, Florida. And every video shows him and that he recorded. ringing the bell for nurse, asking for help, saying, I need help. I'm choking with his lack of speech. Nurses hanging up, nobody going to his room. And he choked because he had fallen on his back with his saliva going there. And he has 13 videos between 12:05 a.m. and 5:15 a.m. that day dying. It's like dying under waterboarding, and these vivid videos capturing his death. And so what happened was I used to be known as a very resilient person. She doesn't give up. She's very tough. She's very strong. Our daughter at the time was 12. Because of all this, experienced one of the worst cases of post-traumatic stress disorder you could ever imagine, PTSD. And interestingly, 2 decades ago, close to half of my members for National Security Whistleblowers Coalition, they were veterans, Vietnam veterans, and they dealt with PTSD. They dealt with PTSD. They had been dealing with PTSD since 1970s, some of my members. And one of my degrees is psychology, and being one of those type A personality, yes, things get tough, you get over depression, these things we can with willpower get over them. I was one of those arrogant people who thought truly that with willpower we'll get over all these things. And this was the only time and the first time in my life I experienced an event that just broke me. Okay. So I was diagnosed with the worst case of they have different like levels, degrees. And I lost 35 pounds. I was very small to start with, but I lost 35 pounds in less than 2 months. And my organs started shutting down because, mind and body stuff.
Right.
Your cortisol level, it's so abnormally high, and it's not like it's going up and down. It's constantly staying at that level. So they are trying to hand you all these pills, lorazepam and alprazolam, and these medications. So, and I'm an anti-big pharma person, and I'm a kind of a person who would absolutely. So I'm thinking, okay, so these Band-Aids, if it's like an infection, let's say PTSD, and you take it for 2-3 months, but then if it's not something that's going to cure, the moment you stop, you're experiencing those things. So that's not a solution. Psychotherapy was not a solution. Then they refer you to EMDR. And you came to a point, or I came to a point where they said, you're going to die. You're not going to make it even to a year because your body has gotten stuck in this, cortisol, high cortisol, the sympathetic parasympathetic system being on only one mode. I was even accepted to programs for psilocybin mushroom for John Hopkins, and they do this, and it has been the most promising one. I'm like, no, I can't leave my child. I have to go for 1 week. And with the PTSD, I was like in this super vigilant, alert state that my daughter needs to be protected. We just lost my husband. Ketamine, I looked into it. Anyhow, it was so bad for 3 years that the only thing that I found out that it worked for me was 100% self-isolation to avoid triggers. And because some of the triggers you can predict and you can avoid. Some of the triggers you don't even know until like they hit you, and all of a sudden you're taken to urgent care. And that seemed to work because then I didn't have to take medication and get hooked on alprazolam and lorazepam constantly. And my daughter and I self-isolated for 3 years. And when I say self-isolated, I mean, there will be times that we wouldn't step outside the house for a month.
Did you homeschool her? What happened to her schooling over there?
Yes, I homeschooled her. My daughter got her high school degree before the age 15. online and homeschooling. She just got her associate degree and she's just 16, and she got a full scholarship, and she's starting her junior year in university, and she's going to be 17 in a month and a half. So that's one thing I did. And It's been only about, I would say, since last March. But it's been 3 months since I have started doing, taking some little steps. And I started researching to find out exactly why and how these things are happening. And I think I have become expert on hospice with the amount of reading and research and interviews I have done. I found an incredible group of people. They have a Facebook page called Murdered by Hospice. There are at least 6,000 people there. There are at least 4 or 5,000 cases of just with the fraud and this morphine things when they would withhold antibiotics and hasten. And in some, it's not even the tip of the iceberg so far, what has been out. And and there is this therapy, I don't know if you've heard of or not. I feel so naked talking about this because my image, and that was, I think, one of the reasons I had to self-isolate. I did not communicate with anyone from the past, anyone, no exception, for a long time. I just couldn't. It's the self image and the public image of you go and read the reviews, let's say even for classified women, and you see phrases like, oh, she has kahunas bigger than any I've ever seen in my life. This woman got balls of steel, and to a certain degree, I had lived pretty much through lots of ups and downs, nothing like this. Wars and coups and being displaced, being war refugees, all of that, my dad being tortured, all the FBI abuses. But I would never stay down, this principle that my father, as a role model too, you fall, you just immediately spring back on your feet, you dust off your knees and you get going. I I I operated like that for 50 plus years. And 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 it's just like having this victim like image, this person who has lost so much weight and is in this shape and has these unbelievable tremors the tremors were incredible. So I just had to self isolate. That was the only thing I could think of. Otherwise, by now, I would be like pill popping. I don't know, taking like 400 pills a day, alprazolam, lorazepam. There were no other alternatives that I could find. And I would go to people who are expert on these fields, and they would say, after 3 months, this is not responding to this. Now, maybe you should be trying this. Now go to this expert. After all that failing, it was self-isolation. But the reason I started this with hospice was I was receiving this one session I started last March, EMDR therapy. Are you familiar? Eye movement desensitization. For
Not really. No.
It is for post-traumatic stress disorder, and it's been around for a long time, for 30 years. And during that session, it just came out. I blurted out. I said something like, there is a reason my husband, my soulmate, my best friend left that video like that. It was Sibel, the journalist, Sibel, the fighter, and go get justice. This is wrong. This shouldn't be happening to anyone. I have seen makeshift hospitals. My dad took me with him to Afghanistan during Afghan-Soviet war. This is 1980. We went there with helicopter. I'm 10 years old. My father was a guy who would say, they would evac some of these airvac some of these wounded, mujahideen soldiers some of them would be moved to some of the top hospitals in Iran, right? My dad would say, this is too late, or this person is severe but can make it, therefore qualifies for airbags. I went and I interviewed all the Syrian refugees in Lesbos Island. I have seen so many makeshift hospitals. I have been to so many third world countries' hospitals. I have so much experience with hospitals and medical fields, with war victims, war refugees, poor nations, third world countries. There is nothing in the world like the healthcare system, aka healthcare system that we have here in this global so-called superpower country. And I think one of the most disturbing part is when an account of cases like this is heard outside the United States, you get so much shock. I mean, face, everything, people expressing shock. Here, what I have noticed, the response is, oh yeah, I know. You should hear what they did to my father-in-law. You should hear what they did to my sister. It is such a common thing now here. That is, to me, that says a lot in terms of who we are, what we are as a nation. We can we can sit down and go nitpick through some little thing because it's very popular on TikTok, or a little mini scandal. But when you look at like the top human issues, I'm not talking about political, it's just human issues. And it's not saying it as someone who wants to demean a nation or a culture, to say there is not going to be any terrorism that's going to bring this country down. It's not going to be China. It's not going to be this. It's not going to be the tariff. We are rotting from within.
Yeah.
We have been rotting from within like any empire throughout the history. We are killing us. Our I mean, it's at such a repugnant stage, and the most frightening part of it is that it's so normalized.
Yeah. People don't
That
realize it. I
is
mean,
beyond boiling the frogs.
I mean, you're familiar with the statistic that's just incredible, that the third leading cause of death in America is the medical system itself, hospitals and doctors.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
I mean, that's just incredible. So what you're saying, it doesn't surprise me that much. And I'm sure there's a couple of people in the chat that talked about their experiences with hospice as well. I've been putting some of the compliments on the screen here. There, we'll put questions up there at some point. But there are lots of people here. You have fans here, and people are happy to listen to you and are enjoying what you're saying. So, you what I'm a big critic of. I call it the medical industrial complex. I worked for it for a long time. I worked in IT most of the time, but I worked for a large healthcare institution. I saw the sausage being made. It's not pretty. But when you've been all over the world, and you've had a chance to look at some of the other medical care systems. How do you think our
Yes.
healthcare system stands up to the others that you've seen?
It's the In my opinion, it's the worst, it's the most
Yeah.
inhuman medical system in the world.
And the most expensive.
The most
Sure.
expensive, the
Yes.
most inhuman. And it hasn't been just third world countries, Middle East. Okay, my husband and I, we lived in Tasmania, Australia for about 9 months. We were there. We lived in New Zealand for close to a year. I was invited to do my PhD program in New Zealand, and then I decided I didn't want to get PhD, just for several reasons. But I have lived in Vietnam, in New Zealand, in Australia, and I have come face to face. I have had dealings with, it's so bad, and I mean, if you were to ask, most Americans would agree that it's bad, but they don't realize how bad is that
No,
this bad because they
even when
haven't
they're
seen the good. They have never been
yeah,
exposed to good.
even well, even the and they badmouth. They're constantly bad. They I hear all the time, and I have lots of people that follow me in Canada and Great Britain. And none of them have badmouthed their healthcare systems. They're government run. But in America here, we say, well, yeah, it's great, but you got to go to Canada and get ready to wait. Wait for whatever you have to have done. Here, you can't even make an appointment. You have appointments that no matter what it is, heart appointments, whatever, and you might have to wait a month or two. So I don't know how much worse the waits are in those other countries, but please tell me Vietnam doesn't have a better healthcare system than ours, does it?
So much better because
Wow.
you see, my father is okay. I mean, look at the medical tourism being, and even number of people finding out here. I know people who go to Panama to get treatments. For example, we have this thing, the chemotherapy lobby industry.
Yes.
Even though there are some amazing now promising treatment alternatives to chemotherapy, the lobby for chemo industry is so strong that it's not being allowed here in the US. Therefore,
Yes.
when we were in Turkey, I met this couple, and this guy is a professor. He lives in with his wife in Utah. Every 3 months, they were traveling to Turkey. Think about the airfare and everything, right?
Mhm.
And this was the second year that his wife was receiving this alternative therapy to chemo
Oh,
in Turkey. And by 1 year after that, she was 100% over. Here in the United States, they had given the diagnosis. This was stage 4. There was nothing. And the best thing
yes.
for her was chemotherapy. And then she could possibly have 6 more months. This lady with her husband, they traveled, and he was saying like airfare, hotel, and we don't have the insurance here. Still, it's not even 1,000th of what the cost would have been if it were available in the United States. They
Yeah.
have other, European countries. So, and then the human approach. When we were in New Zealand, we had to go visit this one doctor, this lady doctor, who actually arrived at this clinic at the same time with it. The doctor herself, she came with her bike, and she's wearing like a surf sweater. So she and I started talking. This would be year 2009. My daughter actually took her first steps. She started walking while we were living in New Zealand.
Mhm.
2009. And I said, both in terms of quality and this, she looked at me and she said, look, and that this makes sense because same thing with my father, which I will bring up here. She said, we become doctors here. You will never, ever, ever be rich because
Yeah.
when you select the field of medicine to be a doctor, yes, you will be respected a lot. It's something that you have passion for. It's a humanitarian work. It's a healing job. It's a job of healing. You will never be poor. You will be very comfortable middle class, right?
Right.
That's an accepted fact. He said it's the only country in the world where doctors can become multimillionaires.
Yes.
There is no
Yes.
other country in the world. Same thing, like in when my father wanted to become a doctor, right? And he had to get the scholarship. And with scholarship, he also worked. His family told him, why the heck do you want to be a doctor? You're not going to make that much money
Mm.
because that is not a profession you choose. It's for money. You can be a businessman, you go, let's say, computer field, all sorts of fields. But medical field is never chosen because you're going to be rich, because nobody is supposed to get rich. It's a healing job. There is like market governs some things, and I'm not an anti-market person, but not everything in life is measured by market value. This is the only country in the planet, in this world, where even death has business and associated with profit. Now, $36 billion, and there are companies, hospice companies, private, that they have stocks.
Mhm.
Okay? So It's a death profit business. It's a medical profit business. When my father came for the first time to the United States, it was mid 90s. So we had some neighbors in Alexandria, Virginia. Some of them were doctors. So my father spoke 5 languages. So he was speaking English with some of the doctors. That night, when we came home from this party that we attended, he said, Sibel, I've never heard of such a thing. He said, when I'm talking to these doctors, they are saying, oh yeah, there is this particular antibiotics or this particular psych medicine. And last year, my wife and 2 kids, we were invited to Four Seasons in Hawaii by this pharma company for 2 weeks. And this is Four Seasons. That's like minimum $1,500, $2,000 a night. Golf package, first class air, as a so that because I ended up prescribing that to more than, I don't know, I'm going to throw a number, 40 patients or 500 patients. My dad, a doctor, a surgeon, actually a well-known one in 2 countries, a well-known one, he said that is against him. He said that's a conflict of interest. You can't accept kickback from pharma as a doctor. These doctors were talking about their trips sponsored and the kinds of bonuses and things they get. So it's one thing to say, oh yeah, it's a capital society, we believe in the free market. It's a totally different thing when you start putting certain things that should never, ever, ever be measured by market value. Because as a society, the moment you do that, you know that the doomsday for that society is your days are counted. That's what I talk about when I say we are rotting from within. And unfortunately, so normalized that we have passed the stage of boiling. We are being deep fried. Smoke is coming out everywhere. And I don't know. I don't know. I don't want to sound like a cynical, jaded person. Let's say realistic. With this attitude, as a nation, as people, um, the least of our problem is whatever is the tariff, or if China is going to do that, or there may be some hidden cells, or there are these really scary immigrants, foreigners who want to rape our dogs because they're into raping dogs, and then they get like 5 billion views on TikTok.
Yeah,
It's really troublesome, and it's 15 years ago, 20 years ago, I would be out there, wake up call, ring the bell, try to wake people up. Something must be done. It's not because I'm jaded, but it's looking at what the state of things today, even versus 24 years ago, right after September 11.
mhm,
Because, Don, we were like raising the alarms on NSA's illegal eavesdropping on all Americans, right?
yes.
Well, and we thought that's horrible. People should do something. People rebel, protest with Don, right? Don't sit and take it. Today, we the people, we are resigned. Not forget about the NSA. Google is spying on us 24 by 7. Facebook is spying on us 24 by 7. X is spying on us. It forget, oh, not only NSA, we have all these trillionaires and billionaires who are freely spying on us, and we are willingly giving them that right. And we actually get very upset if we are disconnected, saying, connect me and spy on me. That's the difference between 24 years ago and now.
Absolutely. This is now. Anybody in the chat, Sibel would be happy to answer any questions you have. Varun Saw, can you see on the screen there, Sibel?
Um, is it the screen for you, or I don't know? You are right now streaming from multiple channels. Is it YouTube?
Yeah, yeah, it's a YouTube. Yes, YouTube. YouTube is where I get the biggest audience. That's where
And there
I
is a
can get the.
question. Can you read the question?
Yes, yes. Sibel covered the Jamal Khashoggi murder years back and showed
Yes.
how he wasn't a real journalist. No witnesses to the incident and no body. Jamal's uncle Adnan was connected to Epstein. Any updates?
No, I'm so glad there was someone actually who was paying attention and how quickly that whole thing went away, right? What
Yeah.
happened? Who really killed whom? I was in Turkey when as it was happening. I actually was in a different city. I went to Istanbul. I covered the entire case. And within a few months, guess who else was killed there? And they said he committed suicide. It was the leader of the White Helmet group in Syria.
Hmm.
So no, there is no update. That's exactly what they count on because it's poof gone. Um, that murder never took place. Nobody was ever found, and and there are so many different interests there were involved in this it's incredible. And then there pay attention to the timing and same place again within a few blocks in Istanbul. The guy who bankrolled and led the whole White Helmet uh, operation in Syria jumped from like a sixth floor building and committed suicide. And it's some really interesting things happened during during that period while I was in Turkey.
And
But no updates on that.
okay, RB Ham, my friend in Canada, I can't find it now, but but it's he asked a while back early on, what do you think of the dancing Israelis? What are your views on 9/11? I've written a lot on it, and I believe it was an inside job, and a lot of people, especially now, Israel's in the news a lot, and Iran, obviously, and you obviously have
I
an interest
definitely
there.
I definitely agree with you. I definitely believe that it was an inside job. But then again, we have to get even more specific when we say inside job. Inside, as in something that everyone in the CIA was involved. No. But then, if you look at the global implications and
Right.
what happened with 9/11, it makes it it's a multinational kind of an operations. It's not a singular nation. But as far as the dancing Israelis, just like Khashoggi case, guess exactly what? We don't know. We don't know what happened with those people or what exactly it signifies. With
Mhm.
Israel, it's a totally it can become like hundreds of hours of discussion. But
Oh, yes.
with those particular Israelis, and let's say with where I was involved with the FBI, if the question is if I got any information on that, no, meaning my information is limited to what you guys and ladies have been exposed and read and scratch your head because Israel you know default was such beneficiary of 9/11
Right.
and everything. I mean, look at Syria, Libya, Iraq, and I don't want to even get into the whole thing with what happened with Iran and the partisanship, what I refer to as the pissing context.
Yeah.
Because Don, you see, people who are having these types of dialogues, you and me, and I don't know, maybe a few other dozens of people. Unfortunately, I just think the numbers are so low. Right now,
Mhm.
at this point, if they were to ask me, so you gave the first interview to this gentleman, Don, is he a liberal or a Democrat or a Republican? You know what I would say? Honestly, I have no idea. I don't
Right.
care. I
I don't
don't
either.
care. I don't care your R. I tell people, I said, I've never been a D, I've never been an R. I really, I can't put myself into one and say, I pledge alliance to this and what it stands in so many ways from what I have seen. D may very well stand for deranged, or maybe D
Yeah.
may stand for delusional.
Right.
R may potentially stand for repulsive or maybe
Yeah.
repugnant. I don't
Yeah.
know. I mean, there are so many adjectives I can attach to either one. I'm neither one of them. And if I am having this conversation with you here, it is at human level and it transcends all these layers of divide and conquer they have put and they have escalated in putting. And this is
Sure.
why less hope of change today than it was even 25 years ago. Yes, it was bad, but nothing like this. And
What do you?
yes,
No, I say, but do you? I take a little hope, and again, I can be black pilled. My audience is very black pilled. You know, obviously, they think everybody is, and they're unsure about me. But in terms of, I take a little hope, and again, I've been aware of the disproportionate power of Jews in media in America, especially, and Israeli influence has controlled our foreign policy since at least the Reagan years, with the birth of the neocons. But this is being talked about openly, especially on the left. I came from the left, and the left now is very anti-Zionist, and they're very critical. They're the ones talking about the Palestinians. The right now, unfortunately, has retreated into this Christian Zionism where they believe that
yes,
these things have to happen. They want
yes,
Armageddon because God wants it, and that's
yes.
very dangerous.
But
So, what
you
are your,
know,
yeah,
that formula was very successful, has been very successful for Israel and Israel lobby. And you can't help but admire that genius way and also the tenacity saying it may take 25, 30 years, but we'll slowly gonna go and take over the target churches in the United States and stick with it.
well, you have you know I
You
have
know, they have done it. Then you're absolutely right about this. But this is the whole thing. Hypocrisy, I believe, I would say, you know, because I used to be an analyst. And when you're an analyst, you can say, okay, let me make a educated bet here. Or I would say, Don, right now you would say one of the keywords that you particularly would really set you off with these issues is hypocrisy, right?
Mhm.
Hypocrisy. Like in early 2000s, all the left, like the liberals, that you know, mostly like the Democrats, saying anti-war. We don't want this war with Iraq. We have all these protests. We had
Right.
this major walk in Washington D.C. I think we had at least 200,000 people. It was really successful. Then comes 2008, and then comes Barack Obama. So then Barack
Hmm.
Obama and Hillary Clinton, right? They just start doing the nation destroying Libya, destroying all the stuff with Syria,
Right.
then the anti-war movement goes completely asleep and dead
Yes.
and quiet. Then
Yeah.
you start the right people, right? People from the R section or the what conservatives coming and saying all the ways we shouldn't be into nation building.
Right.
We shouldn't be in the business of regime change. And they are loud, right? I'm listening to even to some of at the time during that period, the libertarian radio channels, you know,
Sure.
and they are making a lot of sense. But then comes the Republican, and then they go into a hole, they go
Yes.
quiet. It's like a ping pong ball saying, when you make your anti war stand completely conditional, the-
Yeah.
if you're an anti-war, you're an anti-war. I was born and raised an
Exactly.
anti-war. I don't care who is waging it. I'm
Me
gonna
too.
be protesting together with Don, even if it's
And
only two of us. We're gonna
do you,
go out there. It's not the D or an R thing, but unfortunately, yes. And they are having
yes.
shock and awe. That shock and awe during Bush administration when it was
Right.
being televised live. And I
Oh,
am such an
yeah.
anti-war person. And then you hear these people who identify themselves as R and conservatives, and now they hate all the damn foreigners, those goddamn tree-horned foreigners. They are here to screw our country, right? They are cheering, having the beer, burping. Yeah, hell yeah, shocking. This is better than 4th of July firework in Disney World,
That's right.
dude,
Yeah.
dude,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Right? Well, they're back. They're
Exactly.
back. This thing with Iran is happening, and I'm seeing it's like deja vu happening. This is another reason, Don, during these 3 years, when I unplugged, I did not look at anything on X, Twitter, Facebook. It has gotten so toxic. And when you're dealing with such intense PTSD with all the things that happen, I knew the moment I would see these types of, they are not even dialogue, they're not even full sentences. The language has devolved, you know, for, and I'm like, so much for the evolution theory. Man, we are devolving so fast.
Yes,
Like,
we
you go, whoa,
certainly
whoa,
are.
evolve, evolve, and then you just go quick devolving, like devolution in high speed.
Idiocracy was not supposed to be a documentary. I think that's what Mike Judge said. If you've seen that movie, and
Yes.
we are
No,
becoming,
absolutely.
we are
And it's like, I feel so, I feel, it feels so good when we are able to connect right now. Like, there is Dawn here, so I'm not alone in this. And then, there are few other people that in the last 3, 4 months I have reconnected, and they are exactly where you are and where I am.
Do you know
And
Cindy Sheehan by any chance?
yes, I remember Cindy from like
Yeah, no,
2004. Cindy and I
she
were personally together in
no,
2000s.
she's wonderful. She's become a nice online friend of mine. We've been on each other's shows, and I admire her so much. But she's exactly what you talked about. She was the darling of the left during
Yes.
the rock
Me
wall. She
too. I
tragically
was
lost her
too,
son.
big time.
Yeah, yeah,
Oh,
and
yeah.
but as soon as Obama came in, she didn't stop to wait a minute. He's still bombing. He's bombing all these countries, and the left
Yes.
left her. And so now she doesn't. Now she has to consort with the likes of me. But at one time she was being feted by Jackson Brown and people.
100%.
Yeah, yeah,
MoveOn.org. I got 2006 in New York, what is Central Park. I was given the medal by whatever the Pink Color Group Pink, and
yeah,
MoveOn.org, and
yeah.
all the little George Soros. Excuse my language, George Soros bastard childs out there,
No,
like the
right,
the NGOs that are each one gets like 20 million, and it's
right.
like, bravo. Well, I got the First Amendment award. And the moment during at the same time as Cindy Sheehan, 2009, 2010, you're looking at Clinton criminal family. You're looking Obama and these wars and
Yeah,
Benghazi and whistleblowers being jailed.
yeah.
They the way they would say Sabal, it could be mistaken by someone saying, excuse my language, shit.
Right, sure,
That
sure, exactly,
that
of course.
deranged, delusional, psychotic woman,
Yeah,
she must be a total repug. She was posing as liberal Democrat
yeah,
during Bush. Now finally we see her real face, right? It is so unfortunate, Dom, because even with this topic of hospice, right? I even make sure the emphasis is there that they are engaged because they can make so much money, because you have to be at the end of life. They have to certify you. If they have, like in our case, falsely certify you and falsely enrolled you in hospice, right? They're making all this money. There comes 6 months. They recertify you. If you don't die in 2 months, not only they don't make money, they get some penal. So they have to kill you.
yeah,
Okay? Otherwise, they're gonna be caught. It's like
yeah.
he
No,
was in hospice, but then he left for a year and a half, so that they're this panic set. So therefore, they engage in these what I refer to as the covert euthanasia, covert forced euthanasia. The
mhm,
moments now you put that in there, here's what happens. Some people who are pro euthanasia, which I'm not at all attacking any of those people, by choice, whatever they are doing, because we looked at all the options. We were, one of those
sure.
realistic couples. Then they come and say, uh-huh, you hear that? She's part of the Bible Belt and da 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 stuff. Now, it's
Hmm.
very interesting. I did a test for the right too. Let me talk about the right, the one that stands for whatever the R,
Right,
repug, whatever
ridiculous.
you want to call it. Ridiculous repulsiveness. I took it upon myself. I actually did that just a week ago. I reached out to some of the richest, biggest, like they have billions. One of them is called Americans United for Life, AUL, the
Yes.
Catholic Church. So
Mhm.
I'm like, okay, I have a question for you. And all the emphasis and all the things you do, you're pro life. And it's like, is it only limited for the fetuses? Because it's all about abortion and fetuses.
Yeah,
And I
yeah.
respect your position. But why is it that every time I reach out and I say, what are you going to do? Here's the stats, here are the numbers, here are the cases of actual human beings live in their 60s, 70s by hospices, $36 billion industry being killed, complete silence. They don't want to touch
Yes.
it.
Yeah.
What kind of hypocrisy is that?
Yep.
I really want to know what the Catholic Church has to say about this. What, at least in the United States, hospices have been doing. Not all hospices, a lot of hospices, and meanwhile making hundreds of millions of dollars. They call it the ham sandwich. They have this cocktail, and they tried it. They came to our house. They put this bottle, and it's 60% morphine. There's 20% Ativan, and then there's 20% fentanyl. I have
Hmm.
my husband's ALS neurologist doctor saying my husband doesn't need any morphine. What is your pain scale, 0 to 10? He always like makes this, oh, 0, 0.
Hmm.
I don't have
Right.
pain. Why are you leaving these big portions of morphine, Ativan,
Yeah.
fentanyl cocktail, and trying to force me to inject it? My husband? Why are
Yeah.
you doing this? He has bronchitis.
Hmm.
But
Yeah. The
the
system.
Catholic Church is not interested. AUL is not interested. So when you become Don and Sabel and Cindy and
Hmm.
you are who you are no matter what, I respect that.
Cynthia McKinney's another great one too. She's stayed very well. She was a member of
She
Congress, and I
and
think it's
she did, and she tried, you know. We had
she tried
recently Congressman Weldon, you know, he went on Tucker
about
Carlson
9/11.
show.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and he talked about, you know, like one person I was, and I always ask these people, I ask them publicly, like Ron Paul, I liked him, clean guy,
Yeah.
sweet guy.
Yes. Me too.
He talked big, but they wouldn't let us in his office because his chief
Really.
of staff kept telling him he wanted to. If you associate with government whistleblowers like Tony Shaffer, Sabal Edmonds, Russell Tice, or these 9/11 movements, everybody is going to call you tinfoil hat. And at the
Hmm.
time, his chief of staff was his son-in-law. So
Okay.
his job was to prevent, because Ron Paul was a good guy, right? He wanted to do
Right.
things to make sure Ron
Yeah. It was
Paul,
it wasn't Lou Rockwell, right? Because Lou Rockwell publishes
Lou
most of our
Rockwell was
stuff. So
always good. He
yeah.
was good at the time.
Yeah.
I don't know how he is now. As I
Well,
said,
he publishes me regularly, so he's got to be great.
okay. See, because I have been on his show multiple times.
Yeah.
And then, of course, you get totally banned. Like, I'm sure I'm banned with anything that has to do with Soros.
Hmm.
Bec- Back then, at a certain point of time, you said, okay, in a democratic country, we organize, we get united, and we vote a president out. We will replace a president. In
Hmm.
third world countries or other countries, you said we'll get together and we have a revolution. We'll kick out a king. We don't want kings and queens. We kick out a monarchy. We have passed all those stages because, as I said, you just look at 5, 6, 7 guys. They're all guys. I have to say, they're guys. All of them combined have the GDP of 2/3 of the world. And control, when you're looking at the spying power and the media control, because what do you think gets to people and spreads and publicized fastest today? It is what? It's, I don't even have a TikTok, like TikTok. People got to know it on TikTok or the Instagram, and the people who own and operate them.
Right.
What do you overthrow? What do you replace when the rulers, or if you want to call them deep state, okay? How do you do that? You're not going to do it by voting and replacing the president. That's not going to happen.
No. No.
Who
You
are
can't vote
who
ourselves.
are we replacing then, Don?
Yeah, well, I think the only thing I think that I think, and of course this is a question that could take up another 2 hours without even taking a breath. And as the Trump question, I think the Trump phenomenon, and of course now we see it's really kind of blowing up. I think at this point because of the Epstein thing, but those 70, 80 million people, that it's hard to put that genie back in the Bible. in the Bible, the bottle spill. I don't think, you know, when you these people are awake, that's why it's so disappointing to see they're not even throwing them any crumbs. I mean, they can't even release the Epstein list. They're not doing anything they promised to do. They can't stop bombing countries. And
No.
what are your thoughts of Trump and the fact that we've always been so intertwined with Israel, obviously, especially since the 80s, but this is just
Yes.
ridiculous. It's like, I mean, he's
Yes.
holding a chair for Bibi Netanyahu. He held the chair out for him.
Yes. It's again, first of all, the hypocrisy of all those during the D time saying, "Oh, look at this and the wars," but with Israel, it's it's like it's one of those things that I don't have 1%, even 1% doubt.
Hmm.
It and how much role outside nations such as Israel play, especially considering their media influence of who Americans here in the United States vote for.
Yeah.
And you know, I know a very nice lady, and I call her my friend because she is my friend. And I said, you know, and she's a very, very avid, Trump supporter, and she voted Trump. I said, you know, I don't want to be someone like pooping into anyone's party. For that reason, I'm not saying it. But again, not that I'm active today, not that I'm public today. I'm not. I'm having a very isolated, quiet life.
Hmm.
If they were to say, okay, because they used to ask me, what do you predict on for Turkey? And I went on record. There is a video you can go and check. I said there is going to be a coup attempt in Turkey, or a coup, in less than 1 year. 4 5 months later, there was this Erdogan, the coup that happened. And then people started playing this, even mainstream media. How comes she predicted it? It's because if you're an analyst and you start putting data, just like financial analysts, they do for the financial numbers, which is not my area. Here it is. I can make, let's say, several predictions right here on the record on your show. RFK Jr. is going to be booted out from Trump's administration. Mark
Hmm.
my word, not even 6 months.
Okay.
I am making the prediction here, maximum 1 year.
Okay.
And anybody else that people cheered, and we cheered, maybe probably, I would say, oh, that's good, who had anti war policy, you're going to
Tulsi
see,
Gabbard, perhaps. Yeah, Tulsi.
yes, they're going to be one by one out.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, not all at once, one by one, because they have already served the purpose. They united the base for votes, okay, for that change that people envision. It played a major part because RFK Jr. come there and saying, well, now I support this. I mean, there were a lot of people sitting on the fence, right?
Hmm.
They were moved by that. And I don't blame, okay, they were moved by that. You're going to see, because I think I know he sounds extremely stupid, okay? Donald Trump, President Trump, but he's extremely intelligent. He's extremely shrewd. He's a very smart man.
Yeah.
And it was a very shrewd, good marketing probably trick to have some mavericks there that you would anybody who's anti-establishment would say, woohoo, you even
Hmm.
got my vote. Because I mean, it's unheard of, those anti-establishment in so many ways. Anti-forced vaccination, RFK Jr.,
Hmm.
that was an excellent sales marketing move, I believe.
Yeah. Oh,
Very, very
absolutely.
smart. So because it was a sales and marketing move, I don't expect for it to last. Meaning, okay, it did what it was supposed to do. All the Mavericks are going to be out within the next 6 months. You won't have any Mavericks left. You're going to get the good
No.
old
Well,
boys.
I think that, yeah, and I think that, you know, his remark. I can't believe you're asking about Jeffrey Epstein. I mean, that's just, to me, that was a signal that I call it. If you've read some of my stuff I write, Sibel, I call it the Trumpenstein project. I call him Trumpenstein, and I think he's an actor that was inserted into the body politic to co-opt the populist. I'm a populist. The populist third party possible movement and he destroyed, and now you have Elon Musk coming up with them. I'm sure it's going to be quite a third party with Elon Musk
Yeah.
getting it, but that's our choices. So yeah, we have we're almost out of time. We could do another show easily. I'm so glad you saved the whole two
And I'm
hours, but
honored. I'm thankful that you have me on your show. You had me on your show, and I respect the fact that you said, "Oh, they call us jaded." If you were jaded, you would have been gone from the scene. You would have gotten so disgusted and
oh,
say,
I
"I don't want to
still,
have any."
I
You're around
sometimes I don't
because
know
you're not
why. Yeah,
jaded.
yeah,
That
no,
because you
I still, yeah,
that's the
I still.
proof right there, Dad. So keep up the great work because then it gives me hope. Because like, okay, it's not only me. At least I know there's Don there, and then there's like maybe two, three, four other
Well,
people I
there's
know
there people do it.
with
A
the
lot
staying
of the alt
power.
media is a lot of the alt media is good.
So
There's a lot of
kudos to you.
big egos. Yeah, there's a lot of big egos and a lot of infighting. But that's what you get. It goes back to the JFK stuff. One more I wanted to. That you have a big fan in Varun Saw. I don't know how to pronounce his name, but he loved your novel and he said the Lone Gladiator. He said, do you plan to adapt either of her books to a movie or TV series? The Lone Gladiator would work great on
I
the big
would
screen.
love to see that happen.
I bet you would.
I have gotten so many movie film right proposal, not lately. This is like 10, 12 years ago when it first
Wow,
came out.
wow.
No, 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 Unclassified Woman.
Right.
Not a single one on Lone Gladio.
Mhm.
That would be amazing because that was supposed to be three-book series. I wrote the second book, half of it. That was when we were hit with the ALS and everything, but that would be
Yeah.
a dream. I would love to see that happen.
Oh, I bet you would. And I can't tell you how much I appreciate you. You so much information here packed into 2 hours. It moves way too fast. We have to do this again. I hope you come back because we really just scratched the surface.
Anytime.
We could
Anytime.
talk a
And
lot.
I subscribe to your channels. I'm gonna be tuning in as well. And if you have any kind of like a list that you give a heads up to, or if you decide to do things like round table, almost like a round table, three, four-way
Oh,
discussions, debate,
we've had that. Yeah, sure. We've had that.
that will be fun and I would be honored. Thank you, Don.
Oh, well, I'm honored to have you on. Anything you want to give out anything you want to promote or links or anything?
Um, uh, no, it's we have now exactly. This is June 11. We have 60 days to 24th year 9/11, and so the book is there now. There's an audiobook because I was asked. So many people asked me to do audiobook, and I kept procrastinating, putting it off. I don't like my own voice. I think nobody likes their own voice. So
No, your
that one
voice
is.
is great.
Thank
Somebody
you.
said they loved Billy Ray said he loved the way you pronounce Libya. Say Libya for us. I don't know. I don't notice it.
Libya. Okay. Well, I
I don't
guess
know.
I know
He liked
because
the way you
I
said it. I don't know.
the so that one is out there. I am semi once in a while I come and put things on X and Twitter slash
Yes,
Twitter,
yes,
Facebook,
yes, yeah.
especially on the hospice front. I have written it's about I don't know about 180 pages, all documentation, and I took this and I have deposition, court stuff, everything of this murder story that how it happened, all that package, and I'm working up the courage to take the next coming steps. I'm going to make this public because you know there were times that I would be a bit kind of maybe semi jaded and down, and it would be always my husband, my best friend Matthew, who would say,
Mm.
once I would get up and get back, it's like, yeah, that's my girl, right?
Well, we
And
need you. We definitely need your voice. And
well, with this and with this hospice and with especially so many victims and their families, and he left it there, and I'm gonna go all the way with this, even though it's some way so private. I'm gonna make it public, the videos that he left me
oh
with,
boy, yeah, yeah, yeah.
and until inside my head, in my soul, I hear him saying, "Yeah, that's my girl." That's when I'm gonna feel like I'm gonna be in a much better shape once I get to that point.
Well, that's great. That's the way to honor him. And you're a strong voice out there. You've had a remarkable life, and you still have plenty to go. So yeah, I definitely want to have you back on, and I'm so happy you agreed to come on. And thanks everybody for listening. Sibel,
Thank you,
we'll talk
everyone.
again soon. Thanks everybody. Take care. See you
Take
next
care.
week on I Protest, same time.